well, I want to thank you that you agreed to this interview, and definitely would like the Polish communities to be more introduced to you. And I know a lot of Polish people know who you are, especially the ones who live in UK and the ones who live in London and around the people, I would say, communities that have been quite outspoken over the last 3 years. So you have been that voice for many for the last few years, and you've spoken about a lot of damages to people's health. But what I really wanted to find out is how difficult it was for you to become that voice, because I know that you've been quite alone. And if you could just, kind of get us through that journey of your fight, I would say, against the big, huge, massive corporations and organizations that are trying to tell us what to do.
Well, I've been an MP for 14 years, or very nearly now. I was first elected in 2010. I have been an MP who's investigated things. I haven't sat back and read the government handouts and said, well, that's all fine. That's all fine. I'm considered a bit of a rebel in that I've voted against the government on a number of occasions on a number of issues. All I'll say is from where I am now is I wish I'd voted more often against the government, because I don't regret any of the votes where I voted against government policy. I probably regret more of the times I didn't vote against them now. So I was involved within a few weeks of being elected in 2010 in uncovering the Post Office Horizon scandal, which was the biggest miscarriage of justice in UK history. I think what's happened over the pandemic will unfortunately dwarf that. I was slapped wide awake with the pandemic response. I actually did take 2 AstraZeneca vaccines. The second one really hurt me. Terrible side effects from that, and I've had a lot of treatments to try and stabilise the situation. I was very sceptical about the lockdowns, and I saw how many people were committing suicide in my constituency. I was having more people committing suicide in 1 month than we normally have in 12 months. And the government were treating them as sort of collateral damage for a project of propaganda and fear, which was deliberately determined to cause as much upset to the people, and it was completely out of proportion and unnecessary to the risk posed by COVID-19, where 99.8 at least people were going to survive infection. My degree is in biological sciences with biochemistry, specializing in genetics, behavior, and virology. Maybe I was meant for where I am now, because I only did those issues because I was interested in them. I was then an officer in the Royal Marines. I've run my own business. Had quite a number of my workforce when I was in the food industry for 22 years were Polish, very good workers indeed. And when I realised, when I realised what the magnitude of what was being perpetrated against not only the people of Britain, but the people of the world, I went through a sort of 6-8 week mourning period, and I got up every morning and I prayed that I was wrong and that I'd got the data wrong and everything was fine. It was just me. But unfortunately, that's not the situation. Everything I've said about the lack of safety and efficacy of the vaccines, the dangers of the WHO treaty to UK, to Poland, and to the rest of the world. The fact that net zero is, they've bought the science. They've bought, just like they have over the vaccines, they've bought the regulators, they've bought our politicians. We are in perilous times for humanity, all of humanity, and that's whether you're British, Polish, whether you're white, you're black, whether you're Anglican, Catholic, Muslim. We're all under threat. And I think, having watched in the 80s what was happening in Poland, I think we need a big dose of solidarity, because we are many. And the people who are inflicting these harms, terrible harms on humanity, they are very few. And they're going to have to be scared of us.
Yes, and I know you've had a wonderful interview with James Roguski. I have seen it. I'm in the process of translating it as well, because James has been a person that has been on the ball with all the information coming out. Now, in your eyes, what are we facing now? Because what we've got timeline-wise, we've got the treaty coming in, which it's quite likely they will push this through. We also have the IHR amendments. And these, we know they're out of time. They should not be pushing or proceeding this in May on their General Assembly. But what is your opinion? Where are we at? What's going to happen with both of these?
Well, unfortunately, I think I've come to the conclusion that all the institutional barrels in the UK, and I believe in so-called democracies around the world, although not all the apples in every barrel are rotten, all the apples at the top of the barrel are rotten. And any apple that wishes to rise to the top has to be rotted. So, I mean, we've got to take the top off all of our institutions, because they have been corrupted against the people. We are facing, as I'll just remind your viewers that in over a year ago, so January 23, I spoke to the Conservative Party before they expelled me for speaking out over the vaccines. It made all my fears about the vaccine harms and the excess deaths clear to them. Also about the use of midazolam and morphine to euthanize old people, I believe, who were removed from hospitals to make way for the expected first wave of COVID patients, which never really materialized. And at the end of that meeting, I was told in no uncertain terms that I'd got to basically desist from talking about excess deaths and vaccine harms, something I wasn't willing to do. And I was actually told, these are the exact words: there are currently no political appetite, Andrew, for your views on the vaccines. There may well be in 20 years' time, and you're probably going to be proven right then. But in the meantime, you need to bear in mind you're taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world, with all the personal risk for you, which that will entail. And I ended the meeting at that point, and that was it. They were going to throw me out of the party because I wasn't going to acquiesce to those sort of threats. And what sort of society do we want to live in if this isn't a threat just against me? I'm in a position where I can speak out with some sort of platform. This is a threat against everybody, and we can't inflict that sort of society on our children and grandchildren. We're going to have to make a stand. We're going to have to make a stand, and I would implore all the Polish people, the hardworking, God-fearing Polish people who live in the UK and also in Poland and the rest of the world. Now's the time to stand up, because if we don't stand up now, stand up together, we're in for a very, very dark time of central bank digital currencies, digital ID, effectively social credit scoring and control from the centre, 15-minute cities, reduced food production. I mean, it is I think, to be called a conspiracy theorist, well, it certainly is. Everything I see, it's a conspiracy against humanity. And no governments could get it so wrong by accident. And every government around the world appears to be in lockstep, whether that's in inappropriately sexualization of our children in schools through the education system, pushed by the WHO as well, to taking measures which are deliberately reducing food production at a time when in the UK and around the world, food is in shortage and increasing in price by 10% a year. This is the politics and economics of the madhouse. And there may be many things, but they're not completely stupid. So it is clearly deliberate.
Yes.
This is what we're facing. And it doesn't matter if you're Polish, British, Nigerian, we're all facing it.
You took me really great with your answer to the questions that I kind of want to ask. One of them is the woke culture. The other one is the farming, and also the one of the pretty much last ones is the migration. So I did see your speech with one of the last speeches about the woke culture, and you did say how it affects the army. So how for us, it's a little bit different. I must admit, in Poland, we are still a little bit behind with as we call it, the woke culture. But I really would like people to see the
Lucky
threads.
Poland, lucky Poland, that's what I say.
Not too far. We do have issues going in. We're having changes into education and a lot of things over the last few weeks. The new Minister of Education would like to take out the historical things and put in more, as you call it, and I call it the same, the woke stuff. So if you could kind of, tell us how does it affect here?
The woke, the rise of these things, the transsexual rights, which is a minute percentage of the population, and ultimately minorities can't control majorities. They seem to be in a position where they think they can change society to suit an absolute minute minority. At the end of the day, I think when all of this stuff never came through our parliament, I don't ever remember voting on lots of this stuff. It just sort of seeps in. There's huge pressure groups and money coming from America, and the sexualization of our children. That stuff from the WHO, which was probably done 10 years ago. It's the European guidelines for education on sexuality. And when they're putting in that they want 0 to 4-year-olds to know about masturbation, this is completely inappropriate. Under 6-year-olds to be able to express their needs and wishes with regards to sex. Well, no, that's not what they should be doing. By 12, they should have had their first sexual experience, it says, and they should be fully conversant with online pornography and how to access it. No. I mean, quite honestly, a few years ago, I think if you'd exposed children of those ages to those things, that's a criminal offence. If it wasn't done by a teacher, it's a criminal offence. And we need to, parents have got to take back control of those aspects of we should be looking after our children, not trusting them to a state who's going to, that's what they're being exposed to. And I spoke to Australian senators. The same thing's happening in Australia, on the other side of the world, all at the same time. Again, all the governments appear to be in lockstep. And quite honestly, when they can persuade you, when any government or institution can persuade you that a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man, I think they can sell you anything at that stage if you've swallowed that.
Absolutely, I agree. We're looking at the same, as I said, in our education. So now kind of going through the next thing which we've got is we have the same thing that you've been talking about, which is the housing asylum seekers impact. Now, with all these things coming in at the same time, we've got that grab over our health. There's woke culture being pushed in, and then we've got the migration. As you probably know, you're lucky, I believe you're not in the EU, therefore the Migration Act is not something that will have an impact on UK. However, there is a different issue because also, again, something I'm trying to show people in Poland, we do not have this massive influx as yet of migrants. We do have about 3 million Ukrainians right now, but we do not have that influx that is moving through Europe. Most of the time either through Portugal or Spain, that will sooner or later get through to our borders. And what we're looking at is we will be made to take the asylum seekers because we are in the EU. However, in UK...
But also, isn't there a rule coming in that if you won't take them, the number that you're refusing to take, your allocation, Poland will have to pay 25,000 euros.
It's even worse, Andrew.
Per asylum seeker they're not taking.
It's even worse. This is a so-called solidarity clause, which means that they all will be allocated. The minimal number is 30,000. But if the European Commission says it's an emergency, you cannot refuse or pay. You still must take them.
I would urge Poland to go back to the European Union, who are maintaining that they need these migrants to keep the economy going, that if these migrants are so good for countries and Poland doesn't want any, surely the other countries will have extra because it's so good for their economy. I mean, what we've also found in the UK is that the more migrants we have, there is now a link to increases in crime. We're bringing in people who are coming across the border. We're supposed to have a points-based immigration system after we left the European Union, and we're having hundreds of thousands of people we don't have any control over coming over on boats from northern France, despite paying the French to stop them coming. They're not very forthcoming on that. And they have more rights than British people or Polish people who are in the UK legitimately. I mean, the government a few weeks ago have said that they can all have the right to work from their asylum hotels. So basically, you're in a 4-star hotel with a bed and all your meals provided, and then you can go and get yourself a job and keep the money and use that as your base. Well, I mean, we don't do that to our own war veterans who leave the army or the navy or the air force. We don't do that to our own young people. This is preferential treatment, and clearly not something which is going to dissuade anyone from making that trip across the channel and paying unscrupulous people traffickers, organised crime.
Yes, and I think the impact of these borders, even though the UK is not in EU anymore, there is still this influx that you said. How do you think it affects it, especially in? I think you know, because I want Polish people to kind of see what is waiting for us.
What there is also in Leicestershire there are 7 constituencies. Mine is one, Northwest Leicestershire. Mine is the best. Mine's the highest economic growth in the country. We have a large Polish population working very hard. But the government, as I'm an independent MP, the government sought to punish me, and they thought to punish my people for voting for me. So 51% of all the migrants in hotels in the whole of the county of Leicestershire are in my seat in Northwest Leicestershire. And they will become the responsibility of my local council to house them when they come out of those hotels. So it's basically put a financial burden on my constituents. And they think that that's going to hurt my vote at the next election. Well, my constituents know who's done this to them. And it's the government that have done this deliberately. So I'd urge Poland to hold the line. It's not an inevitability that we have to take all of these migrants. All we need is to have more of our own children. So we appear to taking every step to stopping British people, discouraging them from having families and raising children, and then just merely replacing them with migrants across the channel. And obviously, raising populations does increase gross domestic product of a country. But what really makes a country wealthier is increasing gross domestic product per person. That's what actually makes the country feel wealthier. And ours is dropping because these people coming across the channel have no skills. They cannot hold down highly productive jobs. They're not those sort of people, and they're the last sort of people we need in the country. So I would urge Poland to continue to make a stand and don't pay.
Yeah.
Don't pay.
As we're going with this, the growth of that we're talking about, now we've got another thing that they're trying to get on top of, which is farmers. And I did see one of your posts on your Twitter. For anybody who wants to see, I do urge people to go and follow you on Twitter because you put a lot of information and it's amazing information. And one of the things you've put in was, I believe you retweeted someone about no farmers, no food. We currently have a massive protest in Poland. They've been happening. This is mainly because we are being flooded with products from Ukraine, which absolutely do not, they do not go under any norms. We are unable to check, what's inside of these things. We're talking about grain, we're talking about corn, we're talking about lots of products and the things that's been used to produce them. But yet this is all being pushed by the EU. We must open the borders and we must let these products flow, not only to Poland, but also to Europe, which makes our farmers really, really lose. They aren't able to produce. Well, they're able to produce, but they're unable to sell. They're just not able.
I can't understand all this because I'm told. I mean, I spent 22 years in the food industry, and I come from a farming background myself. That basically in the UK, the wheat and barley price haven't really gone up in 40 years. But apparently we've got a world shortage of food, but the prices aren't going up, and none of this makes sense. None of this makes sense at all. And at the same time, as it would appear, our governments are pretty determined to push us into a war with Russia. Our government in the UK and governments around Europe seem also determined to stop us growing food. And in the UK, we're shutting the last steel plant that could make weapons grade steel. None of this makes sense, does it?
No.
I mean, we're an island. We're an island. In the last two world wars, they tried to starve us out because we only produce about 55% of the food that we consume, and they're trying to make us produce less at the same time as increasing our population and control with people coming into our country. I mean, it's quite a hell of a conspiracy theory, but I mean, I can only believe what's happening with my own eyes.
Yes, and so how does it affect farmers? You know, have you heard? Because
the farmers in the UK are coming under huge pressure that there's no subsidies for growing food. The government brought in a bill a couple of years ago about the environment and dealing with farmers that never mentioned food, and it's all about getting subsidies for putting 20% of your land to trees and rewilding and. Yeah, that's all well and good, but we've got food price inflation running at twice normal inflation. So the government will claim that inflation is about 4% in the UK now, but food price inflation is running at 10%. And food is not a luxury item. We have to buy it. So it's putting a lot of pressure on households. At the same time, our biggest food imports come from two countries near to us, obviously, because that's very handy. So the Netherlands, and their farmers are coming under pressure to cut back on production. That will immediately affect the UK. And the other country is traditionally is the Republic of Ireland, which they've got lots of countryside, and they're being told to scale back on their food. Well, I mean, there'll still be enough food for Ireland, but there won't be anything to export to the UK. And where are we going to get our food from in the future? So we're heading in a direction of very bad policies. And of course, if you control the food, you control the people. Bill Gates has just come out bizarrely and said that people who grow their own food on allotments in their gardens, they're doing a huge disservice to humanity. I don't know what drugs that man's on, but he's on something. He's completely wrong. And I would suggest that going by his track record, whatever Bill Gates is suggesting we do, I think the people of the UK and Poland, we should do exactly the opposite.
Absolutely, I think so too. And I think if you look at it, this whole issue that we're currently facing with farmers will not only impact UK, Europe, but as you know.
Well, the Indian farmers started? I think there's a big protest in India. This is, again, it's another thing that's mysteriously in lockstep of governments around the world are attacking their own agricultural base. At the same time as people like Bill Gates has suddenly become the biggest agricultural landowner in America. Well, I mean, I think he is a man who knows he does like a monopoly, doesn't he? I think he's trying to put all the competition out of business in the world, and he'll have all the food. We must not let this happen. Family farms, I think they're trying to drive them out across Europe, and they want big corporations who they can easily control. So we need to, we're going to have to dig for victory.
I agree. So the last two things I wanted to ask. First one is, we know that in regards to health, we have World Health Organization that is trying to tell us what to do. In regards to the woke culture, it's kind of similar. WHO pushing their agenda, but also EU quite, doing the job for the Europe. Then with the housing and asylum seekers and all this movement of people around, the same thing. Now we also have UN, which is currently doing something that not many people have heard. It's called the Pact for the Future. And this is something that they will be looking into implementing as an agreement for all the countries. In a way, the way they're doing it is quite interesting because they're taking the same approach as WHO. So while the WHO is pushing the amendments and the treaty, they say, well, we are not benefiting from it. We are only helping you countries to come together and do it. And here, with this pact for the future, which is very similar, which will be voted, I believe, in September 2024 in New York, it's a similar approach. We are not really benefiting here. We are just assisting the countries to come together and create this wonderful pact for the future. And one of the things that we see in there is the way they're digging into it is by inviting a lot of young organizations, by pretending that these young people will have a little bit more impact, and they will be the ones putting their 2 pence into it. But also what they've done is they've created a chapter called Global Governance. So I know many people don't know about it yet. We're researching ourselves, this whole pact for the future. But what are your thoughts on UN in all of this as this big, massive...
Well, it's all moving towards the Agenda 2030. We know exactly what their plans are for humanity because they've laid them out for us, whether they've written them in books or they're in UN documents of where they're aiming to get to. I don't think the Polish people have ever voted for any of these end games. I know that certainly the British people have never voted for them. And without that, we shouldn't be going along those in those directions. If the people of Poland, the people of the UK have got to lobby their elected representatives and demand that their voices are heard. And we've got to reject this top-down, one-size-fits-all global solutions to everything. It's also very dangerous for humanity. I mean, if there is a genuine pandemic, and for me, Justina, the best way to stop the next pandemic is to find out which labs created COVID-19, who funded it, who authorized it, and prosecute them for crimes against humanity, because there's no doubt about it. I mean, there's 200 lab leaks a year in just America alone from these high security bioweapons labs, and that's presuming that the escape from Wuhan was by accident. So I think holding those people to account is the best way of preventing the next pandemic, which of course Mr. Gates with his foresight predicted the last one, and now he's predicting the next one for 2025. So we need to move very, very rapidly. If you read Klaus Schwab's book, I mean, he says that there's going to be a massive reduction in population by repeated pandemics and wars. Well, mysteriously, he wrote that about 10 years ago, and we seem to be on that track. Well, the plans of the globalists are like a house of cards. It's very lightly glued together with the compliance of the masses. And I think the masses in Poland, Europe, and in the UK don't realise that they actually have the sovereignty. We need to empower the people, and we can tear down this house of cards, I think, really quite quickly.
I agree. Do you think we're talking? We have a very few parties that agree with it, but do you think a Polexit, like a Brexit, would be a thing for us? Do you think looking at what Brexit right now? What will be your suggestions? We are talking about it, but we're really far away. But we have more and more people talking about it.
Well, I mean, I led the Leave campaign for the East Midlands, and it was very nearly the highest voting region for leaving the Europe. It wasn't close in the East Midlands. We were 59% Leave, 41 Remain. My own constituency was 61% Leave, 39% Remain. But what happened to the UK is that we've had all the discomforts and difficulties of leaving the European Union, but we've never been allowed to enjoy any of the benefits, as to teach the people a lesson for having dared to not vote the way that the super elites wanted, which was us to remain under the control of the European Union. They knew what was coming with the pandemic and everything else. And us being outside the European Union just makes us a little bit harder to control, and they don't want it. And, they've got more politicians to have to bribe, haven't they? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, currently they only have to bribe von der Leyen and a few more others, and they've got the whole job sorted. That's why they want to, 196 states. I mean, it's a big job bribing all of those governments, all those leaders. Much better if we have one world government and no elections, because they won't have to bribe so many people to keep control of us.
That's correct.
I mean, it's going to be far more efficient that way, isn't it? Surely. I'm not sure it's going to suit either your people or my people, and I'm not going to be in favour of any of this. In fact, I'm going to be resisting it to the end.
Lovely. I think we all need to resist. Just to finish it up, please tell me, where can people find you? I know it's Twitter. It's amazing. I always go it. But if anybody from the Polish people would like to, anybody would like to see more what you do, but also, get in touch.
Okay, so it's at A Bridgen on Twitter. And as of this Friday, I will have a new campaign, hopefully a new campaign website, which is abridgen.uk.
Wonderful. And for anybody who is in Poland and who lives in your area, I hope we can get more and more people convinced that
I had a great meeting. I had a great meeting with the representative of the Polish community in northwest Leicestershire before the referendum, and not all of them could vote. And at the end of the meeting, we had an hour and a half together, and he was a very sensible chap. And he said to me that if he had a vote, he'd be voting to leave. And I wished him all the best, and he hoped that one day Poland might get a vote. As I've said before, where we are now, Justina, is we're in a situation which we should never be in. I joined a parliament to legislate and make laws to make life better for the people. And what we have now is our parliaments are inflicting legislation on the people, and it's hurting them. We have hurt the people. So we're in a situation where the people are scared of the politicians and what they're going to do to them next, and that is tyranny. But when the politicians are scared of the people, that is democracy. And that's where we need to get to, whether that's the UK, Poland, or everywhere else. That's the way that we should be dealing with this.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for the interview today.
Lovely to see you anytime. Thank you very much, and all the best wishes to Poland. Solidarity.
Thank you.
Thank you.